Prayer is the link that connects us with God.
Some moments in life aren't loud. They don't arrive with warning sirens or flashes of thunder. They show up quietly, the stillness before you decide to pray. Maybe you're in your room alone. Maybe your eyes are too tired to hold back the weight. Or maybe you're walking outside pretending like everything is fine while your soul aches. In those moments, it's not about saying the right words. It's not about sounding holy or putting together perfect sentences. It's about surrender. It's about reaching for something greater, not because you figured it all out, but because you know you can't do this alone. Prayer is not a ritual. It's not a backup plan. It's the most real, raw, life-giving conversation your heart will ever have. And when you lean into that sacred space, the atmosphere shifts. Something begins to change, maybe not outside you, but most definitely within you. That's where this journey begins. Prayer is where strength begins. You don't have to be at your best to pray. You don't need to feel strong, put together, or even fully convinced that things will get better. Strength in prayer doesn't begin with power. It begins with truth. And the truth is, you are allowed to show up exactly as you are. Prayer isn't reserved for the bold. It's not just for those who already have faith. It's for the ones trying to hold on to the last flicker of hope. You come to prayer, not because you feel strong, but because you're empty, weary, stretched too thin, and unsure how much longer you can keep going. And that's where it begins. Right there, in the trembling honesty of, God, I need you. You might be surprised how much power is born from that kind of honesty. The world will tell you to fight harder, to push forward, to figure it all out, but heaven isn't impressed by how hard you hustle. Heaven listens to the whisper that says, Lord, I can't do this without you. That whisper has moved mountains. That whisper has carried saints through fire. That whisper, spoken in faith, becomes louder in eternity than any battle cry on earth. Mother Teresa once said, God does not require that we be successful, only that we be faithful. That faithfulness doesn't have to look impressive. It can look like tears on the bathroom floor. It can sound like silence when you have no more words but still choose to sit in His presence. Faithfulness means you keep showing up, not with perfection, but with persistence. And every time you do, you build spiritual muscle. Not the kind the world can see, but the kind that helps you stand when everything else is trying to knock you down. You don't have to force the strength. You only have to be willing to receive it. Psalm 28:7 reminds us, the Lord is my strength and my shield. In Him my heart trusts. Not in the outcome, not in the plan you've carefully written. In Him. That shift changes everything. You stop depending on your timeline and start trusting His promises. You stop measuring your value by how productive you are and start measuring your peace by how surrendered you are. Because that's what prayer builds. Not just strength, but the kind of peace that makes strength possible. So many people think prayer is about getting answers. And yes, sometimes it is. But more often, prayer is about learning how to carry the weight differently. It's about discovering that God isn't just in the solution, He's in the struggle. And the moment you begin to see Him there, you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what are you building in me through this? That's a question prayer dares you to ask. That's a question only the strong can face. And not because they were born strong, but because they prayed through their weakness. You don't grow through comfort. You grow through surrender. Eleanor Roosevelt once said, you gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face. Fear loses its grip when you've spent time in the presence of a fearless God, because suddenly the things that once intimidated you no longer define you. You've been reminded of who holds the final word. You've heard his voice in the secret place, and that makes you dangerous, not to others, but to doubt, to despair, to every lie that tried to convince you you're not enough. But don't think strength means you stop feeling. Strength in prayer doesn't erase emotion, it embraces it. God doesn't turn away from your confusion, frustration, or sadness. He meets you there. He waits for you in that exact place, and not just to hear you, but to hold you. That's where strength begins, not in pushing past the pain, but in inviting God into it. That's where resilience grows. That's where healing starts. That's where purpose begins to whisper again, even if it's just in fragments. You'll start to see it slowly. How prayer shifts your focus. It doesn't always fix what's broken around you, but it does something even more powerful. It steadies what's breaking inside you. The storm may rage on, but suddenly you're anchored. The winds may howl louder, but your heart knows where home is. And that sense of being grounded in grace, that's not something you earn. That's something you receive when you keep coming back to the only place that never changes, the presence of God. This isn't about how eloquent your prayers are. It's about how honest you're willing to be. God doesn't bless masks. He blesses authenticity. He doesn't wait for perfect language. He waits for surrendered hearts. And if all you have is a broken hallelujah, he'll take that and build something holy from it. Because he sees past the words. He sees the longing, the desperation, the desire to keep going. And he meets you right. Prayer connects you to God's purpose. You don't always recognize it in the beginning. Sometimes when you're praying, all you can feel is the chaos. All you can hear is the noise of your own thoughts spinning in circles, wondering if anything is actually changing. But beneath the surface of every whispered plea, there's something deeper happening. Prayer doesn't always fix what's broken around you, but it does something far more enduring. It aligns what's misaligned within you. It draws the scattered pieces of your heart back into focus. It takes your eyes off everything you're chasing and lifts them toward the only thing that truly lasts, the purpose God planted in you long before the struggle began. You may not see the full picture yet. That's okay. Purpose isn't always clear at first. Sometimes it's not a blazing light. It's a faint lantern just bright enough for the next step. And that's what prayer gives you. Not the entire road, but the courage to keep walking even when the destination feels distant. That's where purpose is born, not in clarity, but in surrender, in the quiet, hidden places where you tell God, I don't know what's next, but I trust you. When you pray like that, something beautiful happens. Your desires begin to shift. You start wanting not just what's easy or impressive, but what's eternal. The more you spend time in prayer, the more your ambitions lose their sharp edges and your soul begins to crave what God has always longed to give you, not just comfort, but calling. Not just safety, but significance. That's what happens when your heart lines up with His will. You stop chasing what's popular and start pursuing what's purposeful. It's easy to lose sight of that in a world obsessed with results. We're taught to hustle for approval, to climb for recognition, to chase validation like it's oxygen. But God doesn't work in noise. He speaks in stillness, and that stillness comes through prayer. In Jeremiah 33:3, God says, "Call to me, and I will answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know." That's not just an invitation, it's a promise. There are things you'll never understand just by thinking harder, but the moment you pray, you tap into a wisdom that transcends what the world can offer. And no, That wisdom doesn't always come as a loud revelation. Often, it's a shift so quiet you only notice it when you look back. A decision you made in peace, a direction you chose not out of pressure, but from a deep, steady assurance that it was the right thing. That's how God leads through prayer, not with spotlights, but with gentle convictions that don't need to scream to be true. Over time, those convictions shape your path. You begin to notice patterns. You're not drawn to the same distractions anymore. You're not as easily shaken by the pressure to perform. You don't panic when plans fall apart because you've come to trust the planner more than the plan. That kind of trust doesn't grow in theory, it's cultivated in prayer. That's where God does the slow, steady work of transforming your mindset, not by force, but by love. There's something sacred about that transformation. A.B. Simpson once said, "Prayer is the link that connects us with God." But it's more than connection, it's alignment. It's not just being close to God, it's being in step with Him. You may still walk through uncertainty, but now you walk with purpose. You may still face resistance, but now you understand that resistance doesn't mean absence. Sometimes the delay is part of the design. God is not interested in speed. He's interested in depth, and the deepest roots grow in the soil of prayer. That's why you feel different after spending time with Him. It's not because your situation has changed, it's because your soul has shifted. You're no longer driven by anxiety, you're guided by assurance. You're no longer reaching for control, you're resting in calling. Calling isn't always grand. Sometimes it looks like showing up where God placed you, doing what He's asked, without applause, without clarity, but with full devotion. And you don't get to that kind of faith without prayer. That kind of faith is built in the unseen hours, when no one is watching, when the only voice you hear is God's, and the only thing holding you together is the peace that comes from knowing He's still working. There will be moments when your calling feels invisible. You'll question whether you're making any difference at all. You'll wonder if your obedience matters. That's where prayer becomes more than a conversation. It becomes confirmation. It becomes the way God reaffirms what you were tempted to forget. You start to remember. You weren't made to impress. You were made to impact. And impact begins with alignment. You'll know you're aligned not because everything is easy, but because everything feels clear, even when it's hard. You'll wake up with peace, not because the pressure disappeared, but because your spirit knows it's where it's meant to be. You're no longer fighting to be understood by everyone. You're resting in being known by God. And that kind of rest isn't lazy, it's powerful. It fuels your steps with purpose that doesn't run dry. That's when you start noticing how different you feel in the presence of distractions. What used to appeal to you begins to fade. What used to excite you feels hollow. You're not numbed, you're awakened. Because now you're not living for noise, you're listening for direction. You're not chasing platforms, you're pursuing purpose. And that pursuit doesn't leave you empty. It fills you in ways applause never could. Mother Teresa once said, "God is more concerned with your availability than your ability." That's what prayer does. It makes you available. Available to be led, to be changed, to be used. You no longer need to prove yourself. You're positioned in grace. And that positioning opens doors that performance never could. God doesn't need your perfection. He desires your presence. And when you give Him that, everything begins to shift. Even your disappointments begin to feel different. You stop seeing them as closed doors and start recognizing them as redirections. You don't see unanswered prayers as neglect. You begin to see them as protection. Because now you're praying from a place of trust, not desperation. You're no longer begging God to fit into your plan. You're inviting Him to shape your path. That kind of trust doesn't come from striving, it comes from stillness. And in that stillness, something deep inside you begins to whisper, I'm exactly where I need to be. Not because everything is going right, but because you've never been more aligned with what God is doing inside you. That's purpose, not a destination, but a posture. Even when everything outside you says you're behind, prayer reminds you that you're being prepared. Even when doors close, prayer gives you the faith to believe something better is being built behind the scenes. Even when you feel overlooked, prayer brings you back to the truth that nothing God begins in you will be forgotten. That's why you can pray with boldness. Not because you know what's next, but because you know who's holding your future. Romans 12:12 says, rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer. That's not just advice, it's a roadmap. Rejoicing, patience, and consistency in prayer don't come from motivation, they come from trust. And that trust is born when you stop treating prayer like a wish list and start treating it like a conversation with the one who wrote your story. Over time, that conversation deepens. You begin to ask different questions. Instead of, when will it happen? You start asking, what are you showing me here? Instead of, why me? You begin to pray, use me. You no longer see prayer as a rescue rope. It becomes the rhythm of your purpose, a daily recalibration, a continual return to the source. And when you live in that rhythm, you notice something sacred. You're no longer obsessed with what others are doing. You're not distracted by comparison, not driven by competition, because you've been in the presence of purpose. And once you've experienced that, nothing else satisfies. You're too grounded in what God is calling you toward to be shaken by what the world is applauding. That's the fruit of alignment. You walk lighter, but live deeper. You speak less, but listen more. You don't panic in the waiting, because you've learned that waiting in prayer is not wasted time, it's preparation. You stop needing every answer because you trust the one who holds them. And in that trust, you find peace. Not because the road is smooth, but because you finally found your direction. You weren't made to wander through life chasing every fleeting desire. You were made to walk with clarity, to live with intention, to love with the kind of depth that only comes from being connected to something eternal. And that connection is found in prayer. It's the only place where your identity, your purpose, and your future meet in perfect alignment. So if you feel lost, pray. If you feel stuck, pray. If you feel like you've been walking in circles, pray. Not because it will instantly show you the entire map, but because it will connect you to the one who will never leave you wandering. That connection is your compass. That alignment is your anchor. And that purpose, it's already planted within you. You just needed prayer to wake it up again. Prayer restores peace in the midst of chaos. It doesn't take much for life to feel like too much. One message, one diagnosis, one mistake, 1 hour of bad news, and suddenly everything inside of you feels disoriented. You try to keep moving forward, to keep doing the next thing, to stay functional. But underneath it all, something feels fractured. You find yourself walking through the day like you're still holding your breath, waiting for relief to come. And when nothing changes, your mind races to find answers, your heart aches for rest, and your soul just wants stillness. That's where prayer begins to do its deepest work, not in eliminating the chaos, but in calming the soul caught inside it. We live in a world that doesn't pause. It rushes forward with noise, with speed, with pressure to always be doing more, knowing more, fixing more. But prayer doesn't rush. It doesn't demand. It invites. It doesn't shame you for feeling overwhelmed. It gently reminds you that peace isn't found in understanding everything. It's found in surrendering what you can't. That is where healing starts, not when the storm stops, but when your heart remembers who's still in the boat with you. There's a moment in John 14:27 where Jesus says something that cuts through the static of worry with striking clarity. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. And that peace, it doesn't depend on predictability. It doesn't require perfect circumstances. It's a gift, given, not earned, offered, not forced, and it's always there when you reach for it in prayer. But reaching for it isn't always easy, because sometimes your mind won't slow down. Your thoughts echo louder than your prayers. You try to speak to God, but your anxiety interrupts every sentence, and still, He listens. Still, He's near. Even the unspoken prayers count. Even the silent tears mean something. You don't have to present peace to receive it. You don't need to fix your fear before bringing it to Him. You just need to bring yourself exactly as you are into His presence. That alone creates space for peace to return. In the writing of William Penn, there's a timeless invitation that speaks into this very moment. In the rush and noise of life, as you have intervals, step home within yourselves and be still. That phrase, step home within yourselves, reminds us that prayer isn't about escaping the world. It's about re-entering it from a deeper place. A place where you're no longer ruled by panic, but grounded in the presence of a God who isn't startled by anything that startles you. And maybe that's what you need to hear again, that the chaos around you hasn't confused God. The storm you're walking through hasn't caught Him off guard. He's not anxious. He's not scrambling to fix what went wrong. He sees all of it, and still, He says, come to me. Not to explain, not to justify, just to rest, just to breathe, just to sit in the kind of peace the world can't replicate, because it doesn't come from the world at all. Prayer doesn't promise an instant end to the pain, but it does offer a place for the pain to land, a place for the heart to be held, a place where your emotions don't have to be tamed, just surrendered. That alone is powerful. Because when you stop fighting your fear and start handing it over, something begins to lift. Something heavy inside you gives way. And that's not weakness, that's wisdom, that's maturity, that's the kind of strength born only in the school of surrender. When Joyce Meyer once said, "The best cure for worry is prayer," she wasn't offering a cliche. She was offering a truth hard-won in the trenches. Because prayer isn't wishful thinking, it's warfare. Not the kind that rages outward, but the kind that wins silently. Every time you pause in the middle of panic to say, "Lord, I trust you," even when you don't feel it yet, that's victory. Every time you open your Bible when your mind is spinning and choose to believe a verse more than your fears, that's breakthrough. And every time you cry in God's presence instead of collapsing in despair, that's healing already beginning. But the healing doesn't always feel dramatic. Sometimes it feels subtle. Like waking up and realizing your first thought wasn't anxious. Like facing a conversation you used to dread with a calm you didn't expect. Like standing in the same storm you thought would break you and realizing it didn't. You bent, you swayed, you wept, but you're still standing. And that steadiness, that's the fruit of prayer. That's the result of roots that went deeper while everything on the surface looked like it was falling apart. When you've walked through enough storms, you start to recognize what peace really is. It's not passive. It's not soft. It's not the absence of trouble. It's the presence of clarity in the middle of it. It's the confidence of knowing that even if you don't have control, you're held by the one who does. And that confidence isn't arrogance, it's security. Not in yourself, but in the one who never fails. The world will try to sell you peace in 1,000 forms: success, relationships, comfort, distraction, but none of them last. They always depend on something staying right, and when that thing changes, your peace disappears. But the peace of Christ isn't situational, it's supernatural. It stands when your plans fall. It speaks when everything is silent. It holds when nothing else does. And prayer is the doorway into that peace. Not once, not occasionally, daily, sometimes hourly, sometimes every few minutes when the anxiety hits in waves. And every time you pray, the door opens again. You don't have to earn the right to peace. You just have to return to where it lives. Over time, that returning becomes your rhythm. It becomes the way you recenter, the way you resist the spiral, the way you reframe the narrative. Not with denial, not by pretending the pain isn't real, but by choosing not to let it be the only voice in the room. You let peace speak louder. And you can only do that when you've learned how to listen for it in prayer. Prayer becomes the tuning fork of your soul. You walk into the chaos, but you're carrying a different frequency. The noise may not change. The circumstances may not improve overnight, but you're resonating with something higher, something holier, something deeper than fear. You're moving with the heartbeat of heaven, and that rhythm rewires how you see everything. You stop reacting to every trigger. You stop spiraling every time someone disappoints you. You stop expecting life to give you peace. You start remembering that peace has already been given to you, and it's your job to return to it, not to earn it, but to receive it again and again and again. That's the gift Jesus left us, not just a teaching, not just an example, but a legacy of peace that can't be stolen by chaos. When your mind is racing, remember, prayer doesn't need perfect focus. It just needs intention. Start small. Start raw. Start where you are. Speak out loud if it helps. Whisper if you can't speak at all. Write it down. Cry it out. Or sit in silence and let your soul lean into the one who already knows what you're carrying. Peace isn't the reward for figuring it all out. Peace is the result of letting go. It's the kind of peace that doesn't always make sense. In fact, it often won't. Philippians 4:7 describes it like this: "And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." That peace doesn't always feel rational. It's not based on logic. It's not based on progress. It's based on presence. His presence. And that's enough. You may be facing something right now that feels bigger than your capacity to handle it. And maybe it is. But it's not bigger than your access to peace, not bigger than your access to God. And that access, it's never been blocked. It's never been withheld. Every breath you take can be a doorway to return. Every moment of tension can become a moment of prayer. Every surge of fear can be a call to lean in deeper. You're not weak for needing that kind of return. You're wise. The strongest people aren't the ones who never fall apart. They're the ones who know where to go when they do. They're the ones who pray not to escape the world, but to re-enter it with peace the world can't touch. So don't be ashamed if you feel overwhelmed. Don't disqualify yourself from peace because of how messy your mind feels right now. Just bring it all into prayer. Let God sift through it. Let Him hold the weight. Let Him speak over the noise. And as you do, something will begin to shift, not always fast, but always faithfully. You'll learn how to walk slower, how to respond with grace, how to recognize when anxiety is trying to pull you back into old patterns. And instead of obeying it, you'll pause, you'll pray. And in that pause, peace will meet you again, quietly, steadily, powerfully. You'll notice the difference in how you talk to others, in how you talk to yourself, in how you move through disappointments, in how you approach your future. Because peace doesn't just calm the present, it reshapes the way you anticipate what's ahead. You stop fearing what might happen. You start trusting whatever happens, you won't face it alone. And isn't that the kind of peace we all long for? The kind that doesn't just protect us from pain, but prepares us to walk through it with dignity and depth. That's what prayer does. It anchors you. It stills you. It reminds you that the storm might be loud, but it's not in charge. The wind might be strong, but it doesn't decide where your heart lives. God does. So when the next wave comes, and it will, you'll already know what to do. You'll breathe slower. Speak softer, react less, trust more. You'll come back to that place where peace lives, and you'll pray, not just to get through it, but to be transformed by it. That's the miracle. Not just surviving chaos, but learning how to carry peace through it. Not just escaping the fire, but walking through it without the smoke settling on your soul. That's what God offers in prayer. That's what you're invited to receive. Not once, not just when it's bad, but daily, faithfully, peacefully. You are not too far gone. You are not too chaotic. You are not too broken for peace to find you again. It's been waiting. And through prayer, you'll remember how to receive it. Prayer transforms the heart before it changes the circumstances. Sometimes what we want from prayer is a way out. We want the problem to disappear, the pain to stop, the relationship to heal, the storm to pass. And in the ache of waiting, it can feel like prayer isn't working, like maybe you're doing it wrong, or maybe heaven's doors are locked, or maybe God is quiet because he's absent. But the truth prayer quietly teaches over time is that God's silence isn't abandonment. It's often construction. What he's building in you is deeper than the breakthrough you're begging for. And before he changes what's around you, he starts with what's inside you. The transformation doesn't always feel spiritual at first. It feels like discomfort, like irritation, like watching the same painful situation play out over and over again while your prayers seem to vanish into the sky. But underneath the silence, beneath the waiting, beneath the frustration, something sacred is being refined, your heart. Not the kind of change that makes you nicer, the kind of change that makes you stronger, wiser, more anchored, more resilient, more holy. That's what God does in the furnace of prayer. Not because he delights in your difficulty, but because he wants you to carry something greater than relief. He wants to give you revelation. There's a reason David cried out in Psalm 51:10, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me." Not fix my circumstances, not make my enemies go away, but renew me. Because sometimes the greatest miracle isn't outside. It's in the way your soul gets cleaned from the inside, the way your motives become less about your will and more about God's, the way your identity shifts from striving to surrender. That kind of heart change doesn't happen instantly. It happens in the quiet classroom of persistent prayer. When Søren Kierkegaard wrote, "Prayer does not change God, but it changes him who prays," he was pointing to something eternal. Prayer isn't a negotiation. It's not about convincing heaven to act faster. It's about trusting that heaven is already working, even when you can't see it. And while you're waiting for answers, God is shaping the one who's asking, not to punish, to prepare. Because the person who walks out of the waiting room of prayer is not the same person who walked in. Think about it. If every prayer were answered instantly, you'd never become the kind of person who can hold what God wants to give you. It's in the delay that patience grows. It's in the frustration that discernment deepens. It's in the questions that faith learns to breathe without demanding clarity. And none of that is wasted. In fact, it's in the unanswered spaces where some of the most intimate moments with God are born. Where your desperation becomes intimacy, where your desire becomes dependence, where your focus shifts from wanting His gifts to wanting Him. That's where the heart transforms, not in moments of emotional highs, but in the persistent return to prayer when your feelings have gone cold. When you keep showing up, not because you feel something, but because you've decided that relationship matters more than results. And in that showing up, something changes, slowly, quietly, but permanently. Your reactions soften, your expectations shift. You begin to respond from a place of trust instead of tension. And that's not weakness, that's sanctification. That's the holy work of becoming who you were always meant to be. Lisa Bevere once said, "Before God changes your situation, He will often change your heart." And sometimes that heart change is the very reason the situation hasn't shifted yet. Because God is patient, not slow, not negligent, patient. And He is far more interested in your spiritual maturity than your momentary satisfaction. He sees the ripple effects of every lesson. He sees the version of you that will come out of this fire refined, with a strength you never knew you had, and a tenderness that can carry others. And because He loves you deeply, He refuses to rush the process. But that doesn't mean you're left alone in the tension. Prayer isn't just where transformation begins, it's where it's sustained. Every time you return, the soil of your heart is turned again. The weeds of bitterness loosen, the roots of trust grow deeper, the fog of anxiety lifts just a little, and the fruit that starts to grow isn't always visible. It's the quiet kind. The kind that helps you stay kind when you'd rather be cold. The kind that helps you forgive when you'd rather fight. The kind that helps you believe again after being disappointed. That's the heart work, and that's what God honors. Sometimes we think strength means holding it all together, but true strength, the kind prayer gives, is found in honesty. It's found in laying down the armor you've built around your heart, in choosing vulnerability over performance, in saying, "God, I don't like this. I don't understand this, but I trust you to make something good out of it." That kind of prayer doesn't sound impressive, but it shakes the gates of hell because it's real. And where there's truth, there's freedom. Where there's surrender, there's power. And yes, the circumstances might still be messy, the storm might still be raging, but something inside you shifts. You stop trying to escape it, you start asking, "What are you doing in me through this?" And suddenly, the question is no longer how fast you can get out, but how deeply you can let God in. That's where peace is born. That's where strength is forged. That's where the miracle really begins, not when life looks better, but when your heart feels different. You start to respond differently to disappointment. You don't spiral the way you used to. You don't panic at the unknowns. You don't grip so tightly to your plans because you've learned how to hold them open-handed before God. And when things break, you don't break with them. You bend, you surrender. You whisper prayers not of despair, but of trust. And those whispers carry more weight in heaven than 1,000 loud declarations. Prayer teaches you how to walk in the in-between, between what you hoped for and what actually is, between the promise and its fulfillment, between pain and redemption. And in that in-between, your heart becomes holy ground. The tears you cry there are not wasted. The confusion you wrestle through is not ignored. Every moment you stay in the presence of God instead of running from Him is a moment where transformation deepens. Even your prayers begin to change. At first, they might be full of why and when, but slowly, as your heart softens, they become more about how can I grow and what are you doing in me? That shift doesn't come from trying to be a better Christian. It comes from encountering God in your weakness again and again until you finally believe He's not going anywhere. Until you realize His love is not fragile. His grace is not limited. His commitment to your growth is not circumstantial. And when that realization settles in your spirit, you stop treating prayer like a vending machine and start treating it like a vine. You abide. You rest. You let His words wash over you instead of always trying to prove yourself worthy. And that abiding shapes the way you live, the way you speak, the way you hope, because a transformed heart doesn't move through life the same way. It doesn't crave the same things. It doesn't collapse under the same pressure. You start to see yourself differently, not as a victim of your story, but as a vessel of something greater. You stop waiting for everything to be perfect before you praise. You learn to worship in the wilderness, to bless the name of the Lord when the answer is not yet. And that kind of worship doesn't just come from discipline, it comes from depth. The kind of depth you only find when prayer becomes your foundation, not your emergency exit. And it's okay if that depth takes time. God is not in a rush with your transformation. He knows what He's doing. He knows when to stretch you and when to shelter you, when to confront and when to comfort. And if you trust Him through the process, you'll begin to see that every delay had design. Every no was actually a not yet for your own good. And every moment you spent wondering if He was listening was actually a moment He was working inside you. So if the circumstances haven't changed yet, don't assume nothing's happening. Take a deeper look. Has your patience grown? Have your prayers matured? Are you more grounded in truth than you were before? Then the miracle has already begun. Because prayer doesn't only lead to transformation, it is the transformation. It doesn't just get you to the destination. It makes you into someone new along the way, and that's a miracle worth waiting for. A life of prayer is a life of power. It's one thing to pray in moments of crisis. It's another to live a life where prayer isn't a reaction. It's your rhythm. And it's in that rhythm that real power begins to rise. Not the kind of power the world flaunts. Not loud or forceful or aggressive, but steady, anchored, unshakable. The kind of power that grows in silence but speaks volumes in the way you walk, the way you choose, the way you carry peace into places that don't know what peace looks like. That's what happens when prayer isn't just something you turn to. It becomes something you live from. Because when prayer becomes your way of being, your spirit stops being tossed around by every shift in circumstance. You still feel things deeply. You still face trials, but you're not ruled by them. You've spent enough time in the presence of God to recognize the sound of truth above the noise of fear. You've learned how to draw strength, not from adrenaline, not from applause, but from abiding. That's what Jesus was modeling all along. In the quiet places He withdrew to, in the early mornings before the crowds found Him, in the stillness before the storms, every miracle He performed, every word He spoke flowed out of communion, out of connection, out of prayer. And if the Son of God didn't move without prayer, what makes us think we can live without it? Romans 12:12 says, "Rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer." It doesn't say to pray when it's convenient, or when you feel holy, or when life gets hard. It says constant, not as a chore, not as a weight, as a lifeline. Because life doesn't wait. Temptation doesn't wait. Fear doesn't wait. So your soul needs something deeper than reaction. It needs rhythm. That rhythm is prayer. And in that rhythm, something powerful begins to take shape. You start to wake up differently, move differently. You begin to notice the way small decisions carry eternal significance. You begin to resist what used to control you, not because your will is stronger, but because your connection is deeper. Prayer isn't willpower, it's a transfer of power. You lay down what you can't carry, and in return, you're entrusted with strength you never knew you had. That kind of strength becomes visible in the unseen, in the grace you extend when you could have retaliated, in the courage to speak truth when it would be easier to stay quiet, in the peace you carry when the world expects you to panic. That's the kind of power prayer grows. Not to dominate, to dwell, to love deeply, to endure faithfully, to live with clarity when everything around you is confusion. And the more you live in that place, the more you begin to notice. It's not that life got easier. It's that your roots went deeper. You're no longer afraid of the wind because you've met the one who commands the storm. You're no longer anxious about tomorrow because you've learned how to sit with God today. And that posture, that confidence, that's what people around you begin to notice. Not your achievements, not your titles, but your peace. There's something powerful about a person who prays consistently, not just occasionally, not just emotionally, but faithfully. The kind of person who no longer panics when life changes because they've learned to lean into the one who never does. That kind of life speaks louder than any sermon. It radiates something this world can't explain, something holy, something strong, something unshakable. Martin Luther once said, "To be a Christian without prayer is no more possible than to be alive without breathing." That's not poetic exaggeration, it's reality. Prayer isn't an accessory, it's your oxygen. It's the way your spirit remembers what's true when your emotions try to hijack the story. It's the way your heart stays soft in a world that's grown cold. It's the way you remain hopeful in seasons where hope feels like a distant luxury. And it's okay if your prayers don't sound profound. It's okay if all you have some days is a sigh or a groan or a single word whispered through tears. God is not grading your eloquence. He's listening to your heartbeat. He's meeting you in the effort, in the attempt, in the turning. That's where the power lives. Not in how impressive your prayer sounds, but in how honest you're willing to be. You begin to understand that prayer isn't separate from life. It's what makes life sacred. Washing dishes becomes worship. Driving becomes intercession. A walk around the block becomes a conversation with heaven. Prayer is no longer just what you do. It becomes where you live. And when that happens, you begin to see how nothing in your day is ordinary anymore. You carry power not because of who you are, but because of who you're walking with. You stop relying on circumstances to determine your attitude. You stop waiting for peace to arrive from outside. You live with the awareness that the kingdom of God is already within you. And with that awareness, every space you step into becomes holy ground, not because of your perfection, but because of your presence, rooted in His. That's what makes a life of prayer so different. You're not just responding to God when you need something. You're walking with Him as if nothing matters more. You're not waiting for a crisis to trigger faith. You're building faith so that when the crisis comes, your foundation doesn't crack. You're not swinging wildly between spiritual highs and emotional lows. You're abiding, you're grounded, and in that grounding, you're free. Free from the pressure to prove, free from the fear of failure, free from the exhausting chase for validation. You know who you belong to. You know where your strength comes from. And in that knowing, you walk with purpose. Not louder, not faster, but deeper. Even in suffering, that power carries you. Because the life built on prayer isn't immune to pain, it's strengthened by perspective. You begin to see that even in the breaking, you are being made whole. Even in the waiting, you are being prepared. Even in the silence, you are being spoken to. Prayer doesn't shield you from life. It shapes you to walk through it with grace. And when others wonder how you keep going, how you keep believing, how you keep showing up, you'll know the answer. Not because you're stronger or smarter or more spiritual, but because you've learned the secret. The hidden strength of those who've walked long enough with God to know that when everything else falls away, what's left is more than enough. That's what a life of prayer gives you. Not more control, but more peace. Not more answers, but deeper trust. Not a pain-free path, but a spirit-filled presence to walk with you in every season. That's the kind of power that can't be shaken, and it's available now, always. All you have to do is pray. If you've been waiting for the world to calm down before you find your peace, if you've been holding your breath, hoping your life will feel more stable before you finally return to God, let this be your turning point. You don't have to wait for things to make sense. You don't need a perfect place to begin again. You can start where you are. You can pray now. And when you do, you won't just feel stronger. You'll become someone stronger. Not because the world changed, but because something sacred changed within you. So from this moment forward, let prayer be your power, your peace, your anchor, your daily rhythm. Because a life of prayer is not a weak life. It's a steady one. And it's calling your name.